All right, today we're jumping into some really cool aquaculture technology coming out of Korea. It's called K-SeaRAS, and honestly, it might just change the way we think about fish farming altogether.
So let's start with the central puzzle this whole thing is trying to solve. How in the world you build a complete, thriving ocean environment, but on land, inside a building?
Well, the reason we even need to ask that question is because our current methods, the traditional offshore fish cages, are really struggling. They're polluting coastlines and are just sitting ducks for things like typhoons, disease, and those deadly red tides.
And the price tag for those vulnerabilities? It's huge. That number right there, that's over 175 billion Korean won. That's the damage from red tides alone. It's a pretty clear sign that the old way just isn't cutting it anymore.
Okay, so this is where a totally new way of thinking comes into play, and it's all wrapped up in this system they call K-SeaRAS.
So what is it exactly? Think of K-SeaRAS as a giant, self-cleaning saltwater aquarium built on land. It's a closed-loop system, which means it purifies and reuses more than 90% of its own water. You get a perfectly controlled, perfectly stable marine ecosystem, completely cut off from the unpredictable ocean.
Let's just quickly follow the water for a second. So it leaves the fish tank, full of, fish waste. It then flows into a tank that stabilizes the pressure before hitting the heart of the system, a biological reactor. This is where special microbes go to work, cleaning everything up. After that, a sand filter gives it a final polish, and bam, clean water goes right back to the fish. It's this beautiful, continuous loop.
Now, making that loop work with seawater is a whole different ballgame. Why? Because salt destroys everything. It's incredibly corrosive. Just look at this breakdown. Every single piece, from the special FRP plastic tanks down to the nuts and bolts, has to be made of expensive, corrosion-proof material like stainless steel. And the whole thing is run by sophisticated control software to keep the conditions perfect. This is a huge and costly difference from any freshwater system.
But the engineering is only half the story. Now we get to the real magic of the system, the invisible workforce doing all the heavy lifting. I like to call them the ocean's tiny janitors. And what they're doing is called biological filtration. Sounds complex, but the idea is simple. The system basically grows a massive community of microorganisms that literally eat fish waste. They take toxic stuff like ammonia and turn it into harmless compounds, keeping the water perfectly clean for the fish.
And you can't overstate how important this is. The researchers themselves said it's the most crucial technology that determines the success or failure of the entire system. If the biology doesn't work, nothing works.
So if you need the perfect microbes for a Korean seawater system, where do you go? Well, you go to the Korean coast. The secret ingredient here turned out to be tidal flat sludge from the sea near Ansan. They found microorganisms that were already perfectly adapted to that specific marine environment. A really clever, homegrown solution.
And check out what happened next. It's pretty wild. When they started, a type of microbe called Vibrio was less than 1% of the population. But once the system got going, the Vibrio population just exploded, eventually making up 61% of the whole microbial community. The system essentially bred its own super efficient, specialized cleanup crew.
And this really gets to the core of why seawater systems are so much harder to build than freshwater ones. For anyone in aquaculture, you know this. It's not just the salt. You need entirely different salt-loving bacteria. You have to use those super expensive corrosion-proof materials, and you're constantly monitoring complex chemistry like salinity and ion balances. You simply cannot take a freshwater design and expect it to work here. So, the science is cool, the biology is unique, but does it actually hold up under pressure? Well, let's see how they put this thing through its paces.
The researchers basically designed the ultimate stress test. They took a perfectly balanced system and just dumped a ton of highly concentrated fish feed right into it. They wanted to simulate a massive pollution spike, pretty much the worst-case scenario you could have at a real fish farm.
So what happened? The key thing to watch was the ammonia level. That's the most dangerous toxin from fish waste. And as you can see from this chart, nothing happened. Despite that massive shock to the system, the ammonia level stayed low and stable. Those tiny janitors just kicked into high gear and handled the extra load, no problem. It proved the system isn't just effective, it's incredibly tough.
That kind of resilience is a huge deal. It means K-SeaRAS isn't just a cool science experiment. It has the real potential to reshape the entire aquaculture industry. So let's talk about what that future could look like. So what's the potential economic impact of all this innovation? It's a massive number, an estimated 4.37 trillion Korean won. That's the potential value it could add to the domestic industry. And that huge number comes from a few key advantages, right? You can grow way more fish in a smaller space, you can produce high-value species all year round, and your supply is totally stable because you're not worried about bad weather or ocean conditions anymore.
And it's not just about making money, it's also about saving money. By moving farms away from the coast, this tech could prevent about 26.5 billion won in damages from natural disasters every single year. It's basically an insurance policy for the whole industry.
I think this quote from the researchers really just says it all. This technology isn't just a better filter. It has the power to completely change the rules of the game for aquaculture, and not just in Korea, but maybe everywhere.
Which leaves us with a really fascinating question to think about. As we search for smarter, more sustainable ways to get food from the sea, could it be that the future of the ocean is actually found on land?